Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. The crisis between Iran and Israel has just deepened. I thought yesterday that there might be a chance, once again, that Israel might hold off or might consider some other possibilities, such as a cyber attack, which is really not good either, but it's certainly a lot better than any kind of military attack. But apparently, my wishes have not been fulfilled. I don't know exactly what will happen, but I must say it does not sound good to me. So in this podcast, I will read you portions of two articles which address the subject. First, an article from the perspective of the Zionist entity, and second, an article from the perspective of Iran. And again, it is disappointing, it is discouraging, and moreover, it is frightening because the spread of this conflict throughout West Asia, a wider regional war, possibly a world war, could all result from what Israel is doing right now. And why? Why? Well, I think on a very basic level, it goes back to what I said before. Israel simply does not care. Benjamin Netanyahu simply does not care. I'm sure there are things he cares about, like his upcoming trial on war crimes charges. But when it comes to global stability, obviously Netanyahu has not a care in the world. Most heads of state at least have some degree of caution when it comes to affairs like this. But it would appear that the Zionist entity has none at all. Even after the United States, Israel's primary financier and supplier of military hardware, has said, please do not retaliate against Iran. If you do, we will not be there to protect you. Iran has made a decision to go on its own path. Is that Iran's prerogative? Legally, yes. Legally, Iran is not bound to follow the ideas of any other country, even if that country is providing them with the means by which they will be carrying out this attack, which is true in case of the relationship between Israel and the US. But still, Iran is a sovereign nation. It makes its own decisions. But sadly, the world, and not just Israel, will pay for this horrible, this tragic decision that has just been announced by Israel. So I will start out by reading you what Israel has said, and then I will follow that up by talking about the Iranian response. This article is from the Financial Times. It is headlined, Israel to retaliate against Iran, warns David Cameron. UK Foreign Secretary calls on Jewish state to do as little as possible amid fears of a regional war. Amid fears of a regional war. Here's the article. Israel has decided to respond to Iran's drone and missile attack, the UK's Foreign Secretary has said, as he warned that retaliation threatened to escalate hostilities. As Western countries stepped up efforts to dissuade the Jewish state from striking back, Lord David Cameron emerged from meetings in Jerusalem to say the situation is very concerning. You don't say, David Cameron. It's clear the Israelis are making a decision to act, Cameron told reporters. We hope they do so in a way that does as little to escalate this as possible. My own comment, I would not count on it. I would not count on it. Continuing. The strike by Iran, which involved more than 300 drones and missiles, marked a dramatic escalation of the hostilities that have engulfed the Middle East since the war between Israel and Hamas erupted last year, and has intensified fears that the region is sliding towards a broader conflict. On Wednesday, 14 Israeli soldiers were injured in a drone attack by the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah on the town of Arab al-Ashma in northern Israel, according to the country's military. Hezbollah said it carried out the attack in revenge for Israeli strikes on Tuesday that killed several Hezbollah militants. Iran launched its weekend barrage, the first time the Islamic Republic has targeted the Jewish state directly, meaning as opposed to one of its proxies like Hezbollah targeting Israel rather, in retaliation for a suspected Israeli strike on its consulate in Damascus that killed several senior Iranian commanders. Iran deemed the attack a violation of its sovereignty. That it was. An Israeli government official told the Financial Times that Israel's five-man war cabinet, headed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has taken a decision in principle to retaliate against Iran for its weekend barrage. But the timing and scope of such an operation remains unknown. Iran's president, Ebrahim Raisi, warned on Wednesday that even the slightest aggression, I will repeat that, even the slightest aggression against our land by Israel would result in a severe and intense response. Speaking at the annual National Day of the country's conventional army, Raisi said that Iran's strike had intentionally been limited and calculated, adding that otherwise nothing would have remained of the Zionist regime. Comment? I am not sure if that is true, given the Iron Dome which surrounds the Zionist entity, but that threat is still frightening. Whether Iran has the military ability to actually do what it is saying is another question. But just the statement by itself is really, really terrifying. And the fact that Iran is now saying that if, or seemingly when, Iran attacks when Israel attacks Iran, that Iran will launch a response much greater than the response it made to Israel's initial attack on sovereign Iranian territory in Damascus, Syria, is truly something to be worried about. I'm not saying that we should individually worry, because worrying by itself accomplishes nothing. When I say worry about, I mean focus on, be concerned about. Please don't let this wrap up your mind. Live your life as best you can, even with this attack looming just over the horizon. Cameron's visit to Israel coincided with a trip by his German counterpart, Annalena Baerbock, and came amid a flurry of diplomatic activity, with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, warning against the consequences of a further intensification of hostilities. Speaking ahead of the G7 foreign ministers meeting in Capri, Baerbock said the international community could not let this inflammable, explosive situation turn into a regional conflagration. Iran and its proxies, such as Hezbollah and the Houthis, must not pour oil into the fire. It seems like that is precisely what they are about to do. Continuing, the region must not gradually slip into a situation whose outcome is completely unpredictable, she said, adding that she had told Israel that smart restraint is nothing less than strength. Speaking after meeting Cameron and Baerbock, Netanyahu said that Israel reserved the right to take any action in self-defense. Comment. Self-defense from what? From your own actions? Bibi Netanyahu, you are the one who started the war. Iran was acting in retaliation. So what in the world are you trying to protect yourself from? There is nothing. Iran has said that as far as it is concerned, the matter is settled, but that if Iran attacks again, that we will respond. If Israel attacks again, that we will respond to an Israeli attack. But we will get to that in the next article. I thank our friends for their support. I don't. In the defense of Israel, and I say this, both support in words and support in actions, he, Netanyahu, said. They have all kinds of suggestions and advice. I appreciate it, but I want to make it clear. We will make our own decisions, and the state of Israel will do everything necessary to defend itself. That is the story. That is the story about Israeli plans from the Financial Times. Now, turning to the Associated Press. This article is headlined, Iran president warns of massive response if Israel launches tiniest invasion. I will repeat that too. Tiniest invasion. So, my thought is that regardless of what kind of attack Israel is planning or will plan to launch on Iran, at least from this statement by the president of Iran, it won't matter, or at least it won't matter that much, that Iran will respond anyway. And Iran has already said that its response will be much greater than its response to the initial act, the bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, which started the war. Again, the Zionist entity, not Iran, started the war. Here is the article. Iran's president has warned that the tiniest invasion by Israel would bring a massive and harsh response as the region braces for potential Israeli retaliation after Iran's attack over the weekend. President Ebrahim Raisi spoke Wednesday at an annual army parade that was moved to a barracks north of the capital, Tehran, from its usual venue on a highway in the city's southern outskirts. Iranian authorities gave no explanation for its relocation, and state television didn't broadcast it live, as it has in previous years. My guess, and this is only my own comment, Iran obviously does not want to make itself a moving target. So it moved to an area where the parade was not previously held and did not broadcast it. That seems pretty obvious. Iran is acting in its own interests, is trying to protect itself from what appears to be a looming Israeli attack on Iran. Iran launched hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel over the weekend in response to an apparent Israeli strike on Iran's embassy compound in Syria on April 1st that killed 12 people, including 2 Iranian generals. Israel, with the help of the United States, the United Kingdom, Jordan, and other nations, including the United Arab Emirates, successfully intercepted nearly all the missiles and drones. Tensions in the region have increased since the start of the latest Israel-Hamas war on October 7th, when Hamas and Islamic Jihad, 2 militant groups backed by Iran, carried out a cross-border attack that killed 1,200 people in Israel and kidnapped 250 others. Israel responded with an offensive in Gaza that has caused widespread devastation and killed more than 33,800 people, according to local health officials. Currently, Netanyahu brushes off calls for restraint, saying Israel will decide how to respond to Iran's attack. The G7 eyes targeted sanctions on Iran and a message of restraint as ministers meet in Italy. Comment. Why not sanctions on Israel as well? Why not sanctions on Israel? I don't expect anyone to answer my question. Given the current world situation, given the configuration of power in the first world, it is doubtful whether any reprisals will be made against the Zionist entity. But one can always hope. Continuing. French president calls for tougher sanctions against Iran as EU, European Union leaders gather for a summit. UN appeals for $2.8 billion to help 3 million Palestinians in desperate need of food and other aid. Columbia University's president rebuts claims she has allowed school to become a hotbed of hatred. And why not? Why not allow Columbia University to become a hotbed of hatred toward the Zionist entity? Why not? Is it political correctness, a term that was originated on the far right? Is that why she is being criticized for that? Certainly, the president of a university, as the standard bearer for that university, has every right to encourage whatever that president deems appropriate. And I think that surely in this case, this university president has engaged in the appropriate action by encouraging what some people are calling a hotbed of hatred to erupt at Columbia. I too hate the Zionist entity. I too love Iran. I too love Gaza and the Palestinians in general. So is someone going to come to me and criticize me for becoming a hotbed of hatred in my condo? Well, obviously not. But why should this university president be criticized for simply exercising her free speech, which is all she is doing? And her free speech is a right that she has. The fact that she is the president of a university has no bearing on it. She can say what she likes, especially as an act of righteous indignation, which is exactly what she has done. She has engaged in righteous indignation, as I think we all should at this moment. Again, as I said before, I think this time is the greatest crisis that the world has faced since the Turkish-Cuban Missile Crisis of the early 1960s under the presidency of Jack Kennedy. Continuing. US's House Ukraine-Israel package gains Biden's support. That's obviously on a different topic, but it is included in the article. Now, going on to another article, it's actually on the same page. And by the way, I will include links to both of these pages in the discussion section directly below the video. Dateline, Doha, Qatar. Qatar's prime minister said Wednesday the country is reevaluating its role as a mediator between Israel and Hamas. Qatar has been a key intermediary throughout the war in Gaza, along with the US and Egypt, and was instrumental in helping to negotiate a brief halt to the fighting in November that led to the release of dozens of hostages. He did not name one side in his remarks, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized Qatar and recently threatened to shutter Qatar-owned broadcaster Al Jazeera. In case you didn't know, Al Jazeera is hosted by the government of Qatar, one of the most respected broadcasting outlets for the news media, hosted in the country of Qatar. Top Hamas leaders live in exile in Qatar, which is seen as one of the only parties with influence over the militant group. Al-Thani said there are limits to the role of mediator and to the ability to which we can contribute to these negotiations in a constructive manner. Mediators have been trying to push Hamas and Israel toward a ceasefire deal. Lots of luck with that. But the sides have remained far apart on key terms. Another article on the same page. UN Secretary General urges maximum restraint. Dateline, United Nations. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is reiterating his call for maximum restraint between Israel and Iran. UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric told reporters Wednesday that rhetoric in the Middle East is becoming increasingly dangerous. My own comment, you don't say. Returning to the article. Dujarric said the world and the region cannot afford another open conflict. The comments follow the Israeli Prime Minister's vow to respond to Tehran's first direct attack against his country and the Iranian president's warning of a massive response. I will repeat that. His warning of a massive response if Israel does. Next article on the page. This one is titled UN Secretary Council to vote on Palestinian state. Once again, Dateline, United Nations. The UN Security Council is scheduled to vote this week on a resolution that would give a green light for a Palestinian state to join the United Nations as a full member, a move opposed by the United States. Pause. If it is opposed by the United States, that would indicate that the United States would veto it. And thus it is DOA. It is dead on arrival. How sad. How sad that the sole superpower remaining in the world, the United States, is taking sides with one of the leading, if not the leading, terrorist nation of the 21st century, and refusing to allow the victims of the Zionist entity to have their own state. The vote was scheduled for Friday afternoon, but Arab nations are pressing for a vote Thursday, when the Council is holding a ministerial meeting on the Palestinian Authority's request for full UN membership. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas delivered the application in 2011. That bill failed because the Palestinians did not get the required support of 9 of the Security Council's 15 members. In early April, after years of failed on and off peace talks, the Palestinians turned to the United Nations again to fulfill their dream of an independent state, sending a letter to the Security Council that was supported by 140 countries. The United States, Israel's closest ally, had promised to veto any resolution endorsing Palestinian membership. U.S. Deputy Ambassador Robert Wood reiterated the long-standing position last week. The issue of full Palestinian membership is a decision that should be negotiated between Israel and the Palestinians. Pause. That's like saying that the issue of the membership of a pig in a colony of ants should be negotiated between the pig and the colony of ants. Well, in this case, Israel is the pig, and Israel will very easily trample upon the colony of ants. So the idea of scheduling or planning for or hoping for a negotiation between Israel and the Palestinian territories is a total waste of time. There is literally no point to it. And of course, the United States knows that, as does the committed Zionist Joseph Biden. Israel says such steps are an attempt to sidestep the negotiating process. Israel's current right-wing government is dominated by hardliners who oppose Palestinian statehood. So literally, it is a catch-22 situation. The US says, well, Palestine and Israel need to negotiate. Meanwhile, Israel is dominated by hardline Zionists. How will that turn out? How will that turn out? No response necessary. Next article. Again, same page. Israel's Air Force reviews its defense of Iran's attack. Dateline Sderot, Israel. An Israeli military official says the Air Force is preparing for future attacks from Iran? I bet you are. The official said Wednesday the Air Force has been reviewing its successful defense against Iran's missile attack over the weekend as it makes adjustments for potential additional fighting. Hezbollah, which has been locked in daily tit-for-tat fighting with Israel through the 6-month Gaza war, is believed to have well over 100,000 rockets and missiles in its arsenal. Combined with Iran's weapons, that could pose a major test for Israel's defense systems. We are preparing ourselves for the next time, debriefing the mission and seeing how we could prepare ourselves for the next attack, said Brigadier General Doron Gavish, the former commander of Israel's air defense, who was now serving in reserves. He spoke to reporters at a military base in southern Israel. Iran says its strike was a response to an alleged Israeli airstrike that killed 2 Iranian generals in Syria on April 1st. Pause. I wonder if Iran used that word alleged, or if the word alleged is being placed in there by the Associated Press to cover their butts. My guess would be the latter, but obviously I have no way of knowing. But I find it hard to imagine how Iran, which has access to all sorts of security and intelligence that you and I don't have, would say alleged. Certainly, if it appears to be obvious to me and to so many people that Israel launched the attack on the Israeli embassy in Syria, then it must be Israel that did it. Or at least I think that is a reasonable supposition. There is certainly a place for using the term alleged. I learned that when I was in journalism school as an undergraduate. But in my view, this is not one of them. Israel says 99% of the more than 300 missiles and drones that Iran launched were intercepted. It was assisted by a coalition of international partners, and the fact that Iran telegraphed its attack ahead of time. I wish Iran had not done that, but that is the end of that story and the end of my reading as well. There are additional articles on that page, but well, you can read them for yourselves if you like. They present additional details, whatever, so you might find it useful to read through the remainder of that page. Again, all we can do at this time of international tribulation is to wait and see. We have no way of knowing for sure what it is that Israel may do. I mean, it could, after all, be a cyber attack, although from reading what Bibi Netanyahu has said, that doesn't sound like it to me. It does appear, and I hope I am wrong, I pray I am wrong, that Israel is planning on launching another military attack on Iran or on Iranian assets, whether that would be Hezbollah, the Houthis, or Iran itself is, of course, an unknown. But still, Israel must know that it is playing with fire. How can it not know that? I mean, the people who run Israel are not idiots. They may be behaving like idiots, but they're not idiots. They are intelligent people with a knowledge of geopolitics, a knowledge of Iranian policy, and a knowledge of intelligence that is provided to them by various sources, including by the United States. So it probably knows as much about Iranian plans, my guess is, as does Iran. I doubt there is much that is hidden from Israeli intelligence. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. Nevertheless, here we are, back and forth and back and forth. Every day a change, or a presumed change anyway, maybe not really a change. Maybe the change is only in the way in which the media is covering it. In a way, I appreciate the fact that the media is trying to project a spirit of optimism. That's not a bad thing. Optimism is never bad, but realism is even better. And so, while it is good to be optimistic, to think of the possibilities that Israel might change its mind and decide to take a different route, realistically, I do not think that is likely. Realistically, I believe that chances are that Israel will launch a major attack on Iran, perhaps comparable or even greater than the attack by Iran on Israel, which in itself was a reprisal for the Israeli attack on sovereign Iranian territory in Syria, the Iranian embassy. So I don't know what else to say. I feel as befuddled as I imagine all of you do, because nobody knows what will happen for sure. I don't even know if Benjamin Netanyahu knows. But if anyone knows, it's going to be him. He is the head of state. He is the one who ultimately gets to make the final decisions. Although obviously he makes those decisions in consultation with other members of his government. Sadly, most of the other members of his government are even more right-wing than he is. So that is not a hopeful sign at all. At all. There are no anti-Zionist parties in the current Israeli government. And the Labor Party has been dead in effect for a long time. It has virtually no power at all in the Zionist entity, which tells us something about the mentality prevailing in Israel, contrasted with the mentality which is more prevalent among Jews in the United States. We could not be more different from one another. While American Jews have called for peace, have opposed further escalation, by Israel in Iran, and have also opposed the war in Gaza. The citizens, the Jews in Israel, are an entirely different matter. They seem to see the world through an entirely different lens. We might as well be on a different planet, in fact. I do not understand Israel. I do not understand why people would fight for a land to which they are not indigenous to. I don't understand it. It is imperialism. It is colonialism, but it is not indigenism, since the Jews living in Israel are not indigenous to Israel. So, again, we have no way of knowing what will happen, as I've said before. We need to wait, and then perhaps wait even more. For the time being, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.